Welcome to another discussion of the New Jersey Forensic Accountant. Today we're going to discuss something that is pretty interesting. It's called OMC. A lot of people haven't heard of it. It's not usually used in schools or graduate schools, stuff like that, or even in forensic accounting information. But it's extremely important. OMC is something that we use in valuations. We use in fraud investigation, forensic accounting, even like business analysis. We use it all the time. And what OMC stands for is Order Management Cycle. And what it does is it's a way for you to better understand how the business is actually operating. Okay, what you do is you put yourself in the place of someone walking into a business, and you go through the whole process and see how the company operates. With the customer, interacts with the customer, what goes on behind the scenes. How do they get the product? How do they make the product? All that kind of stuff. And by doing this, it gives you insights that you wouldn't otherwise have. We just had a pretty difficult litigation. We were court appointed, and this litigation was going on for many years. And during those past years, lots of forensic accounting firms would come in and do kinds of reports and analysis. And so we looked at it all. And it looked pretty good, actually, And then when we started to do our work, the first thing we did was we apply OMC, and we're like, wow, these reports really don't understand what's going on in the business. They're just basically taking a look at it. And the business I'm talking about is something called BHPH, okay, which is buy here, pay here. It's a type of used car sales place. Now, buy here, pay here. In fact, some of the reports didn't even realize that this was a buy here, pay here type of business, which is totally different than any kind of used car dealership. And if you don't understand what's going on in the business and how they interact with the customer and the risk involved, well, a lot of what you're doing, whether it's a forensic accounting, a valuation, is really not that important. And there were some valuations done here where they didn't even mention what type of businesses. And these are big firms. I mean, not as big as us, but big firms. And so what we did was we went through and we applied this OMC, and what happened was, we would actually go through and kind of staple ourselves to an order. It's actually an article written by Harvard Business Review, and you kind of just walk yourself through what happens. Now, in the buy here, pay here place, what usually happens is there's a couple people within the business that are expert at buying used cars. They go to all kinds of shows and things like that, and they'll buy them at auctions, and they can tell what kind of cars are selling and what's a good car for this area and that kind of stuff. And what the buy here does, pay here does, is they'll go in and kind of arbitrage. Okay, I can buy this car for $5,000. I could sell for $7,000. So I'll make $2,000. And they'll put these cars on their lot, and someone like me, let's say, will come up, and they're typical customers, not your typical customer that you would usually find in like a new car dealership, even to buy a used car in a new car dealership, because those cars cost $10,000 to $15,000. Typically, they have some kind of credit. They can get a bank loan. Buy here, pay here customers typically have no credit. Okay, they have a down payment of $2,000 to $3,000, and that's it. These are high risk loans, so that's why these buy here, pay here kind of specialize in this. So if I go in with $3,000, I look at a car and I say, well, I buy that car for $7,000, right? And I can give you a $3,000 down payment. Now what happens? Because I can't get credit, let's say. What the buy here, pay here will do, they have a huge chunk of cash. And what they'll do is actually loan the money themselves. And it's not like your typical financing. What they do is they'll just mark up. Like in this situation, let's say I'm borrowing $4,000, they'll mark it up by 30%. And that would be like $5,200. And what they'll do is sit down with the person and say, listen, what can you afford? Well, I can only afford $216 a month. And what they'll do is make the payment so that he can afford it. Now, they may not even do a background check. They're not going to check his credit because they know it's horrible. And this enables them to sell a car. Now, it seems like really risky, and it is risky, but if you didn't actually go in and use the OMC method, you might miss this whole thing, because this company has $20 million of receivables on their balance sheet. And when you look at this and you're like, wow, there's tremendous risk here. about we actually wrote off or had a 80% doubtful allowance for doubtful accounts on this. Other people who went in there, they assumed that it was like 90% good. I'm like, no. I said, because what typically happens here is that someone like me, let's say I have bad credit, my job is not, I don't really have a job, probably not going to be able to make those payments. And it happens in 30 to 40% of the cases that the people do not make the agreed upon payments. And sometimes they can't find the person or the car. So you can't even repossess it. And sometimes when they do find the car, it's a wreck. So, let's say they repossess my car because I didn't make the payments. And they look at the car and now it's only worth $2,000. Well, I owe, $5,200, including interest on it. These places will typically, they have lots of bays and lots of, people can work on these cars. So they'll fix the car up, put new tires and stuff like that on it and resell it. But you could see that this is extremely complex, this business. A huge arbitrage, like I said. They got to buy a car. They got to understand what kind of cars are selling, what people will pay for the car. Then they got to judge people and see, okay, this person has no credit rating, but I think he's going to make the payments. Then if they don't make the payments, they got to find the car. They got to repossess the car. They got to fix the car, and they got to sell the car. Okay. So this is, this is a real complex business. And most of the people who went through it didn't understand that because they never put themselves in OMC. So when you see any type of business, you got to do this because you find out these little situations. When you're sitting in there as an OMC, say, well, what happens now? And they start talking about your credit rating, and you're like, wait a second, these guys don't have credit ratings. They don't have banks. So anyway, it was really useful in this case. Gave us a real deep understanding what was going on here. Now, let me just take you through this article. This is something that appeared in the Harvard Business Review. And what it basically is what I talked about here. It's called Order Management Cycle Inside the Black Box. And what it does is it forces you to go in and take a look at all the different things, order generation, how they enter the sale, scheduling, fulfillment, processing, assembling, billing, returns and claims, post-sale service, right? I mean, that was something that we looked into because, people are buying these used cars and you don't want to get them, you want repeat customers. So if you have someone who's actually making the payment and he comes back and he says, well, the windshield wipers are busted and this and that, you're just going to fix them because you're set up to do that. It's one of the things you do. You have mechanics who can go in there, put new tires on and stuff like that. So, and then you're done, right? But the only way you're going to understand this is, like you said, you got to staple yourself to the order process and actually go through it and understand inside the company what is actually happening, talk to people, interview people. They had one person handling all these, the $20 million in receivables, which, they were a wreck because, like I said, most of them were past due, late, some of them were old. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. But if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.